Hey Pat, hey Cam. I just wanted to share with you a little bit about the data filtering and cleansing I did for our workshops and show you where I am. It's pretty intriguing stuff. All right, so this is where I started. I went out to Solution Factory, and obviously if you click on View History, it gives you a number over here. What I'm finding is that this number, this external session number, it's got a delta in there. I'm not 100% sure, but because the raw data comes down a little bit different, but it's in the ballpark. But first of all, I just started back to the beginning of last year. Wasn't 100% sure when we released this, and then I went into the detail report, which is actually in this tab, and I would run the detail report and export to Excel. The various ranges. Now, one of the things I hit is this is really old. So when it exports to Excel, it does it in the old .xls format, which means you can only have 64,000 rows, 65,000 rows. So I had to export a couple different files. So you'll see in my data sets here, I've got files from, basically 4 files is what it took, given the volume of data. The next thing I did was I used the Apache POI libraries, the older ones, to read this, and then I formed basically 2 objects. There's essentially a session object and an action object that make up our data, and I put these into array list. And then I started cleansing the data. So let me just show you. I just ran this, but what we do first is we collect the data from all of the spreadsheets. We place it into a global array list, for lack of a better word. And then I begin to do some things. Like the first thing I wanted to do was check, because I was getting, like, if you look at this global array list, it's saying that we have had a total number of sessions of 75,722, not unique sessions, but total sessions. It's saying we have 75,000, which is much different than that report page. So the first thing I did was just basically went out and go to this declaration, and I pull in the array list and just filter out to get a frequency of the unique sessions. So not just how many people have been there, how many sessions, but which ones are unique. And I came back with a number of 24,000, 24,469. And that actually lines up very well. So if you go on this report and you say summarize and you do everything back to June of '01, like you see right here, this is actually the report. It'll list each, it kind of does the same frequency report, and I wish they'd give me access to the database, but they don't, where you can see the unique session and how many times they visited. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see the total number of unique sessions. It is within 2, and that's probably because there was 1 or 2 people from the time I exported the data. But I mean, we're really close, 24,469, and within 2 I can live with. So that tells me that my Java object is actually reading this output correctly, and we're in the neck of the ball game. And it also tells me that that report on the main page is more about calculating unique sessions than it is about total sessions, which is also interesting. I'm not sure where they query that from. All right, so what I did next was begin the cleanse method. So let me go back up here, and I had to kind of build both a data scoring model and a to filter it out. So let me get to the cleanse. All right, so here we have our cleanse. The first thing I did was just remove all the null values. So there are some times where you get this random, just like it can't read anything in the session, so you get nulls. It looks like we had, if you compare it up here, we had 10 null values in our data. After that, I filtered out a couple things. So one is when bots hit it, sometimes you get a not found as the email address, and we don't want those. And I also filtered out from our perspective, like, me, Dennis, and Pat are probably the biggest consumers of this site. So might as well filter out that data so we have a little bit cleaner data. So that leaves us with 61,910 sessions. And at this point, I begin really using some Java streams to look at and bucketize the data. So let me show you how I bucketized it real quick. If I go in here, I wanted to do a stream to get everything that ended with .oracle.com and put that into its own array list. A stream that gets everything that was the anonymous session right here. And then this is actually, the end result is one stream, but it took 2 steps to filter out these two variables. So we get a list of the customers who actually provided their email address, right? So, and that's pretty, if a customer logs in with their email address, I think it's a very high probability that we're going to have a good piece. So let me go back up here. Well, once I create the buckets, I begin doing what I call the session analysis. And this is really where I had to build a scoring model. So one of the things I just want to show you is the way that we log. This is actually a log file, and you'll see this is a generic session. This is most likely a bot. So this, or a ping. This is someone hitting GitHub in a ping. I think this is probably a bot. And you'll see that the first log is always launch.oracle.com, which is just the system log. But the next is it says, what is our launch to URL, right? And this is kind of our double check. If it hits this, it's actually trying to go to the page. And then if I scroll down and find one that's got a few more entries in it, like this one, if it actually gets to the page and the page starts to load, one of the things it does first is pick up the browser dimensions. And this would be like, hey, I not only made it to the site, but I was able to pick up the browser dimensions. And then if they've gotten this far where they pull the JSON file, it really means that the page loads. So if you have this, this, and this, that page loaded on the screen. So this was the first part of the scoring model. I just said, hey, if we look at it and say we'll give a point. If we have the launch to URL, we'll give it a point. If we get a file download manager and it's pointing to this repo, just to make sure that we don't have any bad logs like trying to pull up from other workshops, then we give it a point. And if the page partially loads successfully, so this would be that browser width, we're going to give it a point. So that's 3 points. And then if we have the last thing would be a page load time, that gives it another point. So if we go back here, we should see at some point in these a page load time, if it can be calculated. Yeah, so this would be one of the logs as well. What was the page load time in milliseconds? So if we have all of those things, it truly means that if we have less than this, it's probably a bot or a ping. But if we have all of these, it's probably a legitimate like GitHub hit or a legitimate human access. And next, I said I added points here for any of these. These are physically a human clicking on it. So you get a point every time in the log that this happens, and you add it up. And then I just kind of grouped anything with a score of less than 2 is most likely a bot. Anything between 2 and 5, I call it a gray area. So it could be a bot or it could be a human that just looked at the main page. But most likely, it's a gray area, so I wasn't sure. But anything above this definitely was a human physically touching this interactive, like hands-on, not just the page pulling in the iframe, but physically clicking in the interactive, which is kind of cool. And so, and then I output those steps. So when we do this, this is a look at what came back, and employee sessions probably don't matter that much, but we had 11,116.43 of the employee, of which it looked like 1386 could be I say bots, they fell in that bot category where they scored low. The gray area was 37%, meaning that the page came up, but they didn't click around, but 50% of the time for 58, 60 people in this particular lab, they did it. If we look at just the bucket 3, so these are definitely human interactions, no doubt about it, 830 unique sessions, 128,000 architecture views, and 1,200 video views. The total watch time of all the videos was 785 minutes, which is pretty incredible. And 64% of the time, the individuals watching the video watched it to completion, which is pretty impressive. So those are pretty good stats. So how do we look with the anonymous stuff? All right, this is where we definitely see bot traffic, and I'm doing my best to figure it out and cleanse it. We had 48,690 sessions, of which 45,000 to me or 92% appear to be bots. Like this happens around midnight, where these things just hammer it for 20 times a minute for like 10 minutes or 3 minutes or something like that. So it does appear to be a bot doing it at that point in time, but we can filter out that data. 2340, I think these would actually be legitimate pings, which is pretty good from people hitting the GitHub page. I would feel confident in that data for the anonymous sessions. And of the anonymous sessions, 1,227, which is awesome since May are definitely human, no doubt about it. 387 of those are unique, and they viewed 20,000 architecture frames, and you can see 189 minutes of video watched. Now, if we go down here, like customers, these were customers, like chipaber@yahoo.com or not me, but you get the idea. A customer who actually provided it or, logged in with an Oracle SSO. On the external side, there was 1,577. This is where it gets interesting because if you're doing this, you're probably not a bot. So 257 fell in the bot category. 676 would be in the maybe category or the page just load, and 644 definitely had human clicks. And of those 170 unique sessions, that's 170 unique customers provided us the email address and used the interactive for 15,000 architecture views and 37 minutes of video watched. So I feel pretty confident about this, and Cam, I'll run the stats for you. But Pat, look at this and guide me as to anything you want me to change in the algorithm, or however you want me to present it, and I'll email you this in the video. Hope all is well, guys, and I'll talk to you.